Sometimes you don't choose the fight chooses you. Born to make hacky quips for no one.
Comedy.
Behind the security of a YouTube channel, my honor was shattered by a random teenager in the comments. And now, I must train, becoming faster, stronger, smarter.
海潮中国现在我有冰淇淋，我很喜欢冰淇淋，但是速
gayer, and I will win back my honor by making more terrible videos for my dad to watch. Because if I don't, then who?
A lot of people.
What?
I was listening on your monologue. There's millions of losers making videos online.
You don't...
Oh, shut up and get in for dinner. Then afterwards, go out and get some broad pregnant. I want a grandchild for that.
Alright. Hopefully it's Nuggies.
Being a longtime fan of MMA, and with UFC 300 right around the corner, I thought it would be fun to go over the other UFC Century events in preparation for April 13th. I haven't seen any of the bouts from UFC 100 or 200 in a number of years, and I figured many casuals and superfans alike would enjoy a walk down memory lane. So I've decided to grade each of the fights based on 3 different scores, which will be averaged into a final score, giving you a good idea which fights from the card are worth your time. And then when all is said and done, I'll give you my probably wrong predictions for UFC 300. So like I said, I've been a fan of MMA and boxing for a while. I like to consider myself somewhere in between a casual and a super fan. I don't watch every fight, but at least see the numbered events. Before high school football, I was a 0-2 amateur boxer who was coincidentally a Golden Glove state champion, but only because there weren't any other 13-year-olds my size fighting in Florida at the time. Just Puerto Rican and Cuban kids that weighed as much as a slightly chubby Cordy. I also quit high school wrestling after one practice and have a few years of BJJ experience, but only picked it back up recently. So take that information as you will. The grading system I'm using for the fights is the triple F system. The 3 criteria being judged are
The fight, the flair,
yes,
the veracity.
All scored like how you should score attractiveness, meaning 5 is average, and a 1 or 10 is basically impossible. Because you gotta leave some room for something better or, God forbid, worse. The fight is all about just that. The back and forth, the fun of the match, crisp punches, clean takedowns, and heart. This category needs some help from both fighters to have a good score. A top scoring example for a fight would be Hendo vs. Hua at UFC 139.
We go to the judges' scorecards for a decision. All 3 judges score this contest 48-47. Declaring the winner by unanimous decision, Dan!
The next is flair. The score can be carried by one fighter and has anything to do with style points. Are they trying rare submissions, unique striking, or taunts? Flair can also be boosted a lot by the walkouts, because everyone loves a good walkout and we could use some more elaborate stunts. The top scoring fight for flair would be McGregor vs. Mendez at UFC 189. I mean, we got Sinead, spin kicks, and a KO finish. Kinda hard to beat.
Listen to this place. Oh, big shot from McGregor. Look at the clock closely. 10 seconds. Oh, he's hurt. Could he finish him here? It's all over. Conor McGregor is a UFC.
The last criterion is ferocity. Truthfully, brutality felt like a better word, but I wanted the triple F thing. Anyways, this section is all about making your mom or girlfriend say, "Oh my god." The blood, the haymakers, the slams. Basically, if the fight would have made the late John McCain have flashbacks of being in a Vietnamese bamboo cage and scream human cockfighting, then it probably gets a good score. A top tier example would be Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald 2. I mean, if you look at Rory's face, it's like he was fighting fucking Freddy Krueger in there. And honestly, if you went the whole distance, Probably would have beat out Hendo and Hua as my example, but we get the TKO. That's pretty good for a ferocity score.
Superman punch. Nice jab by Robbie.
Yep. It may very well come down to these 5 minutes, partner. Nicely done again by Lawler. And again.
Wild exchanges. Oh, he tagged him with that left.
Look at how ferocious Lawler is here in the 21st minute. Lands it.
He's hurt. He's hurt.
This may be it.
That's it. That's it.
It is all over.
Wow.
Robbie Lawler remains the welterweight champion.
Let's get to the first event of our discussion. The 100th UFC took place on July 11, 2009 at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, Nevada. The event was sold with the help of 3 major fights, that being the heavyweight championship unification bout between Brock Lesnar and interim champ Frank Mir, as well as the welterweight title defense against Thiago Alves by GSP, and the tough Season 9 coaches fight between Hendo and Michael the Count Bisping. But before we get to the headliners, we gotta start with the prelims. Alright, the first fight on the card was Matt Grice versus Shannon Gugerty. This fight ended 2 minutes and 36 seconds into the first round, via an arm-in guillotine by Slutty Shannon. Before the end, the fight was kind of boring, which drops the total score. But since Gugerty choked Matt Grice unconscious, the final score gets bumped up to a 5 out of 10. The next fight was another first-round guillotine, but this time by classic fan favorite Tom Lawler. Along with submitting his opponent to the same move as the prior fight, he had a great walkout. And I can't really do it justice. Let me just show you what I mean.
I like it a lot, but you know what? I don't know if Tom Lawler should be pulling this off with CB Dollaway being the Doberman, and the best part of this walk-in might be Seth Petrozelli.
Well, you know what? Tom Lawler's nuts.
Terrible? Maybe. But I'll take that over a regular walkout 100 out of 100 times. The bout itself was rather short, only lasting 55 seconds. But it felt like more of a fight, and Tom Lawler left Dollaway
Out cold.
All that being said, I'm grading this fight 7.3 out of 10. This next fight is kind of underwhelming. Not really anything in terms of flair, and the ferocity is pretty average. In terms of the fight, it's mostly just bullying by Gong Hyun Kim. He successfully kind of makes TJ Grant his bitch, but other than that, there's not much to the fight. There's a point deduction from TJ Grant in the second round, making it an even worse loss. And other than that, the best conclusion I can come from it is that his corner really screwed him. Just lies to him all the time. Overall, I'd give this fight a straight 5. Now, the next fight is pretty interesting. We got Jim Miller versus Mac Danzig, son of Glenn Danzig.
Mother!
Immediately, Rogan starts ripping on Mac Danzig for being a vegan.
He is also one of the more unusual fighters, Mike, in that he follows a very strict vegan diet. No animal protein whatsoever. Everything he gets is from vegetables, and he does this because he is a lover of animals, and he doesn't believe in factory farming or in animal cruelty. So that's a very interesting thing. A guy who really loves animals, but also likes beating the crap out of human beings.
Kind of funny. As well as him being on a 2-fight losing streak. So, kind of a nail-biter for him. Must-win situation. But unfortunately for Mac, things didn't quite work out for him. And he lost 30-27 unanimously to Jim Miller. I even had the same scorecard. I'll give it to him though, he had heart. This is the famous quote where Joe Rogan says his face looks like a horror movie. So that right there scores him an 8 in ferocity. And the heart also gives him an 8 in the fight. But the problem is there isn't much flair. That drops that score to a 5. Overall, you get about a 7. Which you gotta remember, that's a great score, because 5 is average. For the next fight, we have a young version of the man who becomes the UFC supervillain. The perpetually flaccid John Bones Jones. Quite a controversial figure in the sport himself, And while gas station boner pills or PEDs might have a part in this, you gotta admit he's an exciting fighter to watch. Jake O'Brien was the one unfortunately tasked with stopping the John Jones hype train. He eventually submitted to a guillotine choke in the second round at 2 minutes and 43 seconds, making it the third guillotine choke of the night. Overall, the fight was pretty good and Jake O'Brien gave it his best, but it's John Jones we're talking about. I'm going to give the fight a total 6.7 out of 10. The next fight was the last fight of the prelims, and featured Mark the Hammer Coleman facing up against Stephan Bonnar. And while Stephan Bonnar won the first round, it wasn't enough to win the match. Mark Coleman came back to win round 2 and 3, winning by unanimous decision. I would probably give it a 6 out of 10. The fight was there, the Frosty was pretty good, but pretty much nothing in terms of flair. Alright, now we made it to the main card of UFC 100. We got 4 pretty good fights and 1 kind of stinker. Before we start, I want to say that the John Fitch and Paulo Thiago fight was delayed until after the main event, but I'm going to be talking about it in the order of the card. Alright, so the first fight of the main card is arguably maybe my favorite fight of the main card. I don't know, you'll see what I mean. But we have a close back and forth between Yoshiro Akiyama and Alan Belcher. It was a split decision. We have 30-27, 28-29, and 29-28. Because of that, I gave it a high fight score and pretty good flair score as well, but the Frosty was just kind of average, so that's what brought it down. Now I will say Yoshiro Akiyama's walkout helped him a little bit, just because Love Ave Maria, and he had like a version of that song for his walkout, so that bumped up his flair a little bit. And then you also got to give a little bit of flair just because the awful Johnny Cash tattoo, I mean, it's in contention for worst tattoo of all time. There's 2 kind of controversial parts of the fight. Old St. Rogies, he disagrees with the judges and how they scored it. He thought Alan Belcher should have won. I disagree with Rogies. I agree with the judges. I think they did it right. I'll tell you why. And then the one other controversial thing is that Alan Belcher absolutely destroys Yoshiro Akiyama's nuts in round 1. So why I agree with the judges. I think the first round kind of could have went either way. I scored it 10-9 for Akiyama, but I wrote that it was very close, and you can tell if you watch the first round. It's a very close round. For round 2, 10-9 Akiyama again, but I think he solidly won this round. I don't think could score it for Alan Belcher winning. The third round, we have another close one, but I scored it 9-10 Akiyama, so 10-9 Belcher. I also wrote it's very close though, so I can see how the one judge got 30-27. I can also see how the one judge scored the fight in favor of Alan Belcher. But Joe Rogan was talking about how Alan Belcher was robbed, and I don't think that was the right call. If anything, it was a really close fight. If you think Alan Belcher won, that's fine, but if you had to give it to someone, I really think you have to give it to Akiyama. Because of the flair and the good back and forth, I give the total a 6.7 out of 10. One fight on this main card has a higher total score, but this fight has such a good back and forth that I might consider it my favorite for the fight aspect of this total card. The only other one that comes close would be Danzig Miller. I mean, that was a great back and forth fight too, but I think I gotta give it to this one. Alright, so the next fight is Paulo Thiago versus John Fitch. This fight actually happened after the main event, which I looked it up, and apparently I guess it just happened because of a time constraint. I guess Zuffa or Dana White or whoever was worried that people were going to tune out before it got to the Brock Lesnar fight, so they decided to...
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live! Fuck it! Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! Thing sucks!
Yeah, pretty boring. Overall, give it a 4.3 repeating, and I believe it's my lowest total scoring fight, on the entire card. So, if you're gonna skip around, I would probably just say skip this one anyways. Alright, the next fight, pretty fun to watch. Sad if you're a Michael Bisping fan. I'm sure we all know what I'm about to say. He gets absolutely slept by Dan Henderson, but you gotta give him credit. It wasn't the second round when that happened. In the first round, while I did give it 10-9 to Henderson, I did also write that it was very close. And if you watch the round, it was actually a pretty close round. But nonetheless, Dan Henderson destroyed the count. So anyways, I gave the fight scale a 7.5. which it's kind of weird. I mean, he did get knocked out, but I did say the first round was pretty close. And it's not like you can, I mean, you can help getting knocked out in a sense, but also you kind of can't if they just fucking land a great shot. There's not much you can do. So 7.5 for fight. Pretty boring walkouts. Could be a 4, but I'll just give it to the boys. I'm going to give it a 5. And then for ferocity, I mean, Dan Henderson, it looks like he literally murdered Michael Bisping, so you have to give it an 8. Overall, give it a 6.83. All right, this next fight is watching a very kind of goofy Canadian man absolutely dominate Thiago Alves for 5 rounds. The first 2 rounds, I scored it. Well, every round I scored 10-9 for GSP. I don't think Alves won a single round. I even thought it possibly could be 10-8s for round 1 and 2. The only reason I think Thiago Alves even kind of came back at all is that this fight is apparently the fight where GSP pulled or tore his groin muscle, and you can see, or you can hear him tell his corner that. But anyways, he still won the fight, dominated it. I'm giving it a 6 all the way around the board, so that averages out to a 6 as well. But you know, Monster Energy barcode score 666-6. Next fight, main event. It was supposed to be the main event of UFC 98, I believe, but instead they made this the craziest super card ever at the time. The champion Brock Lesnar versus the interim champion Frank. Now, folks, it's a pretty damn good fight. To be honest, the first round, kind of total domination by Lesnar, but it was fun to watch. And Frank Mir did kind of pick it up in round 3 until about 1 minute and 48 seconds in. He gets slept. Flair 5. Straight down the middle. I mean, it's Brock, so you know he's bringing a little bit of WWE energy to it. Good showmanship, but pretty average nonetheless. And ferocity, dude, Brock Lesnar is fucking. He's Brock Lesnar, man. So ferocity scores a 7. Overall, 6.3 repeating. Yeah. Anyways, I gave the total. If you average all of them together, I gave the total event a 6.11 out of 10.
UFC 200 took place on July 9, 2016 at the T-Mobile Arena, also in Las Vegas, Nevada, and also with Brock Lesnar headlining a fight. Because, you know.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
It was also supposed to have John Jones fighting Daniel Cormier, but this is when John Jones pissed hot and Dana White had to sadly tell Daniel Cormier that he couldn't fight him. I'm also going to say this is notable because they have a really cool yellow ring. Just love it. And it's the last UFC event of the Sufa era. So bye-bye Fertitta brothers. Alright, the first fight of UFC 200 has Jim Miller versus Takanori Gomi. Jim Miller is now a BJJ black belt instead of a brown belt. And Takanori Gomi apparently is a boxer and a baseball pitcher. His striking looks like shit, and apparently he throws all weird and from the side because he's a baseball pitcher. To be honest, it looks like Jim Miller just dominated someone who doesn't train in MMA that much. But it was kind of fun to watch. Fight score, pretty average, 5.5. Flair, also average, a 5. And ferocity, about a 7, because Jim Miller fucking TKOs him. Overall, going to give the score a 5.83. Just a lot of domination from Jim Miller. Alright, the next fight is Gegard Mousasi versus Thiago Santos. This fight's a pretty fun watch, almost makes it through the entire first round until Gegard Mousasi KOs Thiago Santos. So that's going to score him an 8 in ferocity. The fight was okay until, you know, he got knocked out, so I'm going to give that a 6.5. But kind of like nothing in flair, almost negative flair, so we're going to give it a 4 on that. Altogether, the score gets a 6.17. Very fun one, only about 4 minutes and 32 seconds into the first round, so just watch it. It's a nice one. It's fun. All right, next we have the king of hidden house blades and Woody's gamertag's best friend. It's Joe Lozon versus the eloquent homeless man Diego Sanchez. This fight is another first round finish, with Joe Lozon winning at 1 minute and 26 seconds in. I'm gonna give it a okay fight score, pretty good, at 7. The flair is a 6 because Diego Sanchez's walkout was actually kind of fun. Joe Rogan also gives us this interesting fact that stare downs, don't know if it's still true.
Diego Sanchez is a werewolf. He's like just a wild man, mean face. And he means it. You know, what's really hilarious is watching Joe Lozon react to it at the weigh-ins. Joe just started cracking up. Because Diego was telling him, I'm a nightmare. Joe just couldn't help laugh. Now, statistically, there's been some studies done, and guys who smile at stare downs tend to lose. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it's something that people who dork out on statistics like to bring up.
And the ferocity is really high. Good score on this. I'm going to give it an 8.5. I would give it a 9. The only reason I don't is because Joe Lozon is so nice that he's checking with the ref the whole time and like basically saying, dude, when are you going to stop it? Altogether, that brings it to a 7.17 total score. Great fight. Next fight, we have Enrique Marin versus a mashup of Cobra Kai, Bloodsport, and a Blade Runner villain, Sage Northcutt. Sage, I hope you changed out the mouthpiece. It looks like you're missing teeth. Now look, this fight's interesting on a lot of different fronts. Right off the bat, I'm going to give it a great fight score. It's going to get an 8 out of 10. But I will say, it's a lot of grappling in this fight. It's just interesting, fun grappling. Another note is that the crowd loves a good 69. North-South. But the crowd loves it. They can't help but scream every time it happens.
But still has a few holes in his game, and that's why we see him here with Marin on top of him.
Northcutt has finished all 7 of his victories. Marin had won 7 straight before the finals of Season 2 of The Ultimate Fighter Latin America.
But great back and forth fight. The second round was pretty close. First round was close as well, but not as much. And the third round, I thought Northcutt kind of closed it up nicely. For flair, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 because Sage Northcutt looks like an 80s movie villain, and I love that. And Enrique Marin also was crying during his walkout, which I'm sure going in the arena is emotional and awesome, but time and a place for it, and I don't think it's while everyone is staring at you and you're supposed to be going into a ring and beat someone up. I think that should be probably after the fight or in the locker room with your team. Just saying. But anyways, so I'm going to give flair 7 out of 10, and then the ferocity is also a 7 out of 10 because goddamn, these dudes were throwing. You got to give them that. And there's a kick in round 2 that I'll just show you now.
A little bit of a left hand.
Pretty sweet. Alright, next is the bantamweight bout between TJ Dillashaw and Rafael Assunção. This fight, pretty good round 1. I thought it was really close, but I gave it to Dillashaw just purely on points. But although the first round was kind of close, eventually Dillashaw pulls away and starts looking like a middle school bully, which he already looks like. Just like TJ Grant's corner in UFC 100, Rafael's corner kind of lies to him and tells him that the fight is within his grasp, when truthfully, by the time they get to round 3, his corner should be telling him to go for knockouts or submissions, because that is the only way he was going to win. TJ Dillashaw bullied him. Nonetheless, pretty fun fight to watch. I give the total a 6.83. Next fight is Kelvin Gastelum versus Johnny Hendricks. This fight is pretty average on flair, and not too brutal, but it was a good fight. Overall, gotta give it a 6.17 for the good exchange, but like I said, just not very brutal. Definitely one to check out though. The last fight of the UFC 200 prelims is Juliana Pena versus Kat Zingano. This is probably my least favorite fight of the prelims. Nothing to do with it being a lady fight. I mean, you'll see later, the next lady fight is great. But round 1 is kind of a wash, just a little bit of wrestle fucking, and not in any fun way you'd want to see with 2 women. But Kat Zingano won round 1, and then Juliana Pena came back to win round 2 and 3. So a little bit of good back and forth, virtually no flair, and maybe one of the least ferocious fights of the entire card. So gotta give that a total 4.33. Alright, on to UFC 200 main card. Starting us off, we have Travis Brown versus accurate puncher and very inaccurate shooter Cain Velasquez. Cain wins by a TKO with punches in the first round at 4 minutes and 57 seconds, basically at the end of the first round. The whole fight is mostly Cain dominating, like throwing wheel kicks and stuff, so that would help for flair. Fight's okay, and with the TKO you gotta give him some ferocity. So total score, gonna give it a 6.33. Okay, the next bout is a 5-round fight by Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar. This one was a unanimous decision for Jose. I and the judges looked like we only gave the first round to Frankie Edgar and Jose Aldo the rest of them. And really the big tell of this fight is just the size difference between the two. Frankie looks like he's trying, but Jose's just throwing him around, ragdoll. Both the walkouts were pretty good, and Jose was styling on Frankie Edgar, so I got to give it a 7 on flair. We got to give Frankie points for the heart, so I'm going to give it an 8 on the fight, and then a 6 on ferocity. Altogether, that's a 7 out of 10. Good fight. The next fight is just kind of sad. Of course, I'm talking about Daniel Cormier and Anderson Silva. We already know why John Jones couldn't fight, and unfortunately, Anderson Silva was just not up for the task. Too old and on too short of notice, Anderson Silva is seen just sucking wind the entire fight. He is going for it, and you gotta love his heart, but with 48-hour notice, he just wasn't even able to put up a fight. All the rounds went to DC in a dominating fashion, and if it wasn't for my love of Anderson the Spider Silva, it'd probably get a lower score, but we're gonna give it a 5 out of 10. Next was Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar. Unfortunately, this fight is a big problem. And that's the only round that could go either way, at least in my opinion, is boring as shit. Round 1 and 3 kind of have better action, but it's mostly domination by Lesnar, with Mark Hunt just looking for that signature one shot the whole time it seems. So overall pretty average, but you get to see big boys punch each other really hard, so that helps the ferocity level. Giving it a 5.7 total. The final fight of the UFC 200 main card was Amanda Nunes versus Miesha Tate. Holy shit. Please, if you don't like women fights, watch this. Amanda Nunes takes Miesha Tate's belt via rear naked choke 3 minutes and 16 seconds into the first round. She boxed her up and submitted her, all within 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Great performance by Amanda Nunes, takes the belt, one of the best fights of her career. And Miesha was trying out there. Gotta give the fight score a 6 out of 10. Flair, pretty average, 5 out of 10. And then the ferocity with the Lioness is an 8.5 out of 10. Overall, giving the score 6.5. Great fight. And that's the conclusion for UFC 200. Now, let's get to what we've all been waiting for. UFC 300. On to UFC 300. As alluded to earlier, this video was originally supposed to be a prediction video, but due to copyright strikes, blah blah blah, by the UFC, this is now a retrospective, I suppose. I'm not going to really go into detail about UFC 300. It's been a week, and I don't remember everything. I can't rewatch it because I didn't have it on my ESPN Plus account. And so I'm just going to do a little bit of footnotes. I mean, everyone, if you've seen this video, you probably watched the fights, and if not, then you've at least seen the highlights. Now, the fights that come to mind, number 1, obviously, Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje. We witnessed a war that was back and forth the entire time. I, going into the 5th, had it 2-2, and the knockout at the end was just a cherry on top. It might be the greatest fight I've seen in terms of fight, and the only better last-second knockout was Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. But that wasn't even really last second, technically. I mean, it kind of was, but this was quite literally last second. So if you haven't seen a fight and you're going to watch any of them, watch this one. Next, I want to talk about Bobby Green and Jim Miller. Unfortunately, Jim couldn't get the trifecta. I wanted him to win at UFC 100, 200, and then 300, but Bobby Green was too much. Now, I'm a fan of Bobby Green too, so it's hard to root against him, but like I said, I just wanted that extra special 300 for Jim. Unfortunately, Jim Miller got boxed up by Bobby Green pretty much the entire time. Bobby stood on the outside, hitting him with his jabs straight down the middle. Jim Miller never stopped trying though. You gotta give him credit. Kept pushing, making Bobby back up, but that was kind of Bobby's plan is what it seemed like. Just keep backing up and hitting him with your jab. It was a fun fight to watch and a fun fight to root for Jim Miller for, even though he got the loss kind of badly too. But he truly displayed like a warrior spirit, without sounding too gay. The next fight in my head, and I don't know why, because I don't really remember anything from it, but I remember enjoying watching it was... I'm gonna fuck this up. Just because it's not in front of my face. Huajiang Li? No, that's wrong. Whatever. The two Chinese ladies. I actually studied Mandarin in college as well, but the name's not in front of me, so I don't. And I don't care to find it. But it stood out as a good fight. I could be wrong, because I really don't remember any of it, but I remember enjoying watching it. Maybe watch it, maybe don't. Then, of course, the main event. The main event was a good fight, and I wanted Jamal Hill to win. I predicted it, but, you know, you guys didn't see that, though. That version of the video got fucking sent to YouTube hell. But the knockout by Alex Pereira was satisfying, and I think really cemented him as a problem, especially in his weight division. I don't think he's going anywhere. Yeah, I don't know. Alex Pereira is going to be tough to handle, and they're only giving him more time to train his ground game. So, look, if you didn't watch UFC 300, I don't know why the hell you watched this video, but thank you. I would go recommend the fights that I talked about for 300, and if you want to go back and watch 100 and 200, they're great events too. I would say that I think 300 was more exciting overall than both of these, meaning both of 100 and 200. But either way, like, every fight was at least pretty fun to watch now that I think of it. I don't know. I feel like maybe the Holly Holm one wasn't that exciting, but Kayla Harrison just dominated her, I feel like. I could be wrong. I don't know. Like I said, I was pretty drunk watching it, and I wasn't doing my homework. I thought this video was going to be a prediction video. But here we are. Anyways, thanks, and see you next time. Don't know what I'm going to make, but we'll see.